like a bonus episode 10.5. Just following up our discussion on the history of Christendom, the history of the church and Christianity. Episode 10 was kind of where we find ourselves currently within our culture. And then that just, we kind of left that episode with kind of a couple open-ended questions, kind of the idea of what should our gatherings then maybe look like, and what should maybe our re-engagement, especially post-COVID, what should our engagement with our community look like. So I don't know if you want to take us away. We've got
part of what the meat of our conversation last time really revolved around leadership, not just pastoral leadership, but I don't know that we said this specifically. So not just pastoral leadership, but those that we have kind of gathered around us to serve in leadership capacities, and the need for those in leadership to really step into the way things have changed. And be aware of the tension that is there. There were a couple of quotes that I gave us from one from Winston Churchill. The empires of the future will be empires of the imagination. This is going to require some imaginative thinking. Mm-hmm. What was done last year or 10 years ago, 20 years is no longer going to be viable in the way that culture has changed and people have changed the way that they connect to one another and therefore to God as well. And then another quote from Albert Einstein. He says, "I am enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world." And so our conversation really landed, and we realized that we didn't have enough time really to explore these two questions and the underpinnings of each one of these questions. So really, that's what we're kind of unpack. So the two questions are these. One, we need to consider how we are restructuring our gatherings. And the second thing is we need to consider how we are re-engaging the place that we are planted. So both of those have to do with the activity and the life of the church, and specifically then the people of the church and how it is that we kind of engage the world that has changed around us. So that first one there in restructuring our gatherings, there are four tenets that I just kind of put down there, four things that we need to consider in relation to our gathering. What about worship? Are we asking the question, are we attributing worth to God in our worship? Or is our worship simply a reflective of the things that I want to see happen in worship? Mm-hmm. Do the things we do in worship evoke discipleship? Or again, is it achieving something else? Are we calling people to a mystical comfort with God, kind of engaging the unknown questions and the mysticism that is kind of lost in the age of enlightenment? Mm-hmm. And then the last one is the weekly gathering primarily for the already saved or the not yet saved. Some
that last
bigger
one.
questions there, yeah.
Well, and to me, right, this is where I think we need to re-engage the imagination, right? Because I think a lot of times it's always been, well, we'll do two different services, right? We'll have a service that can be the service for the unsaved, right?
Yeah.
Or that could, and again, and I don't know if that's bad, but get something we did here before COVID. We had a kind of a second service. We called it the gathering service, and it was more focused on fellowship. It was focused on a meal. There wasn't really a worship aspect to it in the form of any sort of singing, but there was definitely a Bible study element to it. But it was focused on different table groups, and again, you could sit at the same table every Sunday with the same people if you wanted to. We tried to have some some of our elders and leaders at the different tables, and to me that was something where I'm going. Especially before COVID, saw a need of just some fellowship, right? And I think even now more so. And again, trying to jump through all those hurdles of, well, how do we even do food anymore, and how do we do meals, and and I was, and that's, so we're not looking to restart that anytime soon, but it's that same thing of just going, how can we reimagine this gathering? We still had a communion time, we still, still had some of those elements, but I think I think it's going to be things like that where you go, which and I don't, I'm putting you guys on the spot. I don't, I know some of the things I've been hearing you guys talk about is even just the time of the service, right? Does it have to be at this time? Could we have a Sunday gathering at 5:00 on Sunday nights?
Right.
I don't know if that's what you guys are thinking or anything, but right, just engage in the imagination. Yeah.
Well, I think, part of it might have to be, again, going back to multiple services, but rethinking through what those are. That's not a 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, right? It might be an 11 o'clock on Sunday morning still, and it also might be a 4:30 on a Tuesday, and those kinds of things. And that's just thinking about. That's meant to be reflective of our community, right? A very blue-collar community with a lot of jobs that are, shift work. There's just not a lot of jobs in this community that are 9 to 5, 5 days a week, right? So, so thinking about that, just realizing that the structure and the timing of our services was developed for an agrarian society that we really aren't anymore. Even agricultural communities like this one aren't necessarily agrarian in the same way that they were
100 years
right,
ago.
100 years ago. So it's where it comes back to the imagination.
Yeah.
And I think one of the tasks for us as leaders is not to just be imaginative ourselves, but how to foster that in the life of our leaders, and how to be gracious when they lack imagination, how to bring them along. So this week with the passing of Justice Ginsburg, there's been lots of different quotes circulating from her, but one of the ones that I've seen frequently is fight for the things that you believe in, but do so in a way that brings others along, I think is how it says.
Yeah.
Read. And I've seen some people who they stop at the fight for the things you believe in, which is like you miss like 50% of what she was saying there. But anyway.
Literally.
But in any case, right, just that belief that we have to advocate for these changes if we believe that they are that they need to happen in the life of the church, but we have to do it in a way that brings along the saints that have gone before us and doesn't alienate them or make them feel ostracized like the church isn't for them anymore. And that might be the biggest challenge, for which there is no answer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I like your question about discipleship, and because I think that's a tough, especially with the way I think predominantly most services are probably conducted by and large. Where is there room for that? I had a very good talk with a friend of mine this week, and I think that's where they're struggling. Right, is just that they're kind of trying to do this Christianity thing on their own, trying to kind of learn on their own, and as much as you just come to church. It's got to be. I hope there's something more than we'll just come to church.
Yeah,
that should probably be a piece to it. But again, where is the intentional? Okay, let's take what you have and build upon that.
Yeah,
and again, I think that's part of that fellowship piece. I think that's part of that, quite frankly, is probably maybe not going to happen on a Sunday morning, right? Of why don't you come over for dinner Friday night? Why don't you come over for lunch Saturday afternoon? Something where there's, it's, and again, I think everybody's so selfish with their time, right? That you go, I don't need to add one more thing, but you go, but that's what we need, right? We need that sharing life. We need that.
Well, it's very interesting as you were talking there, the stark reality of the fact that we don't. And in reading about the life of Jesus, we don't see him in the temple a whole lot. He is out in the marketplace, or he's on the hillside talking with large groups and small groups. He is in all the places that he, in quotes, is not supposed to be. He's with the down and outers, he's with the sinners, he's with the tax collectors, the lepers, all those places, and he's doing things with them that really he's just touching their lives in very practical ways. We see him a lot around the table.
Yeah.
See him a lot around the table.
So one of the things, so as I read that question, I think I would reframe it a little bit, or contend that the things we do in worship are evoking discipleship. The question is, what are we discipling our people in?
Okay.
Right?
It's the question below the question there.
Right. Because, so some of that is just the intentionality of what we do. Are we discipling our church to be consumers that approach worship about what they like, about what fits them? Are we just reinforcing the things that they already believe and know to be true? Are we discipling and forming them to be, to just be good people, right? Leaning again in that moralistic therapeutic deism, which, I'm sorry, a lot of evangelical churches do, and they call it the gospel, and it's not.
I love you, Jay.
Or are we doing things that form them and shape them into what it is to be the people of Christ? And that's one of the things where I'm more envious of liturgical churches, because they do that better than evangelical churches. And we've moved away from it because we've said, well, that's just too Catholic, or it's just too repetitious that you don't. It doesn't have any meaning. Well, I had a professor in school would say, yeah, that's why I only tell my wife I love her once a quarter. But when I do, it really means something. The reality is, for 6 days of the week, the world is forming us into an image, right? Maybe a bit of repetition on Sunday morning would actually, because we need to be reminded every Sunday morning. So using intentional language. On Sundays, I say the same thing. I do the same call to worship every week because it reminds people why they are there. When I read the scripture, I read it in the same way and I ask the same questions. When I get done preaching, I ask the same thing week after week.
Wow, yep.
Because in my mind, it's a concerted effort to form the church, right? Or really to counterform them.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And I do it without novelty, because novelty gets lost in the chaos of the world we live in. But by doing the same things week after week after week, they know what to expect, and it begins, I think, to have greater impact, because then they're going to leave again and go.
It was the same crux in youth ministry, right? Here's my kid for 6 days a week that's just been bombarded by everything. You've got him for an hour for youth group.
Fix them,
right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the same. It's the same. It's that same thing.
The other thing that is under that first reconstructing our gatherings, are we calling people to a mystical comfort with God? Out of the Age of Enlightenment, we landed a lot of mysteries that had medically universal mysteries that we were able to understand through reasoning, through invention, all of these things. And all those things were wonderful, but it basically created an ethos that said, if you can't test it, if you can't run a hypothesis and prove it, then it's not real. And so the mystical got pushed to the edges. And now mysticism was considered like a fringe, and even in the church, in the mystical nature of how God operates, that conversation got pushed to the edges and said, well, mystics, we just since we don't understand, we're just not going to deal with it. And I think we have to understand that mysticism and the mystical nature of God is something that we have to refamiliarize ourselves with, and say to our people, God is going to do some things, because God says, I'm going to act in peculiar ways. I'm going to act in unusual. I'm going to do things that are different than what you expect. And that there's some mystical nature to that we have to become okay with.
And I wonder if this is tied in part to the discipleship piece, right? And again, all of us coming from a non-kind of Pentecostal background, I'll give you, for instance, two Sundays ago, I don't remember what song it was that you were leading us in, but one of my sons had been not doing well Sunday morning, and so I was quite literally keeping a pretty tight rein on him. But it brought back a lot of good memories of worshiping with my dad, and there was just this moment. It was just a great moment. I was in tears a little bit, but I think it's part of that, going, okay, so what is it in this moment, right, that I'm supposed to be learning, right? Lord, what are you trying to teach me? What are you trying to show me?
Yeah.
And not just going, I can't cry in church. You know what I mean? and part of it maybe was just enjoying that moment, right? I'm here with my son. He may not be singing. We've got masks on, but I'm going to sing, right? And I think that was something I remember. I remember my dad worshiping. I remember my dad singing.
Yeah.
I remember, and so I don't, it's those moments that I don't. Do we teach our people well enough to go dwell in that, stay there, figure out why is it that memory? Why is it those emotions? Why is it? And maybe it is. Maybe it's just to savor that moment. Maybe it's a moment that he'll remember. Maybe not. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, it's those things. I think especially from our traditions where we don't maybe give people the freedom or permission to stay there.
Well, and I think that sometimes, and you said it right there. I think our tradition lends itself to worship is something to be accomplished and completed. And we got to get to, so we sang those songs, and then there's going to be the offering, and then I'm going to pray this prayer, and we're going to dunk, 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 and I'm going to be able to beat the Baptist to big boy. So
Beat the Baptist.
So we probably have a significant role and a significant job to do in breaking some of those trends. Difficult as that may be. Ugh. Yeah.
How dare you?
Okay, so the second one.
Just so you know, we have a minute and a half left.
Yeah.
Oh, we tried
With our
to
time.
really hard to stay on a short stretch here. All right, we'll try and get through this.
I paused the timer.
You paused the time.
Okay, we need to consider how we re-engage the place we were planted. Are we as the church reflective of Christ? That is outside of Sunday gatherings. Everybody knows the church gathers on Sunday. What about the other 6 days of the week? Are we reflective of Christ? Yeah. Are we physically engaged with the community in valuable ways and not just philosophically engaged, where we have conversations that discuss theology and the possibility of doing something? And the other part is our engagement valuable? That is it further? Does it go beyond things like Vacation Bible School and Trunk or Treat or whatever other community
Now you're
big
just throwing
splash?
rocks.
See, I love those things. I love those things. I'm not against those things at all. But is there a lasting impact beyond because those big splash events, everybody loves the big splash events. Right. And that's really what those are. Sure. There's nothing wrong with those. But what are we getting to beyond those things?
Well, that's, so several years ago, as a ministerial association, we had somebody come in and kind of do that one-day training thing. And he talked a little bit about this. He called them lightning events, right? They were that big flash. He said, but what is your church doing to be light? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right? Lightning's easy. It's just a big one-off thing. But the people don't need lightning in this community. They need light. And so that really became formative for me to start thinking about the redemptive ways in which we as a church were working for the blessing and prosperity of the place God had put us.
Yep.
So we actually sat right here in this room. I don't know if you remember this or not. We had a ministerial meeting. We sat right here on this table. I think I was at this end of the table. And we talked about what are we going to do. And we said, there's 5 schools here in St. Louis, and there's 1, 2, 3, 5 of us.
Right.
We're all taking it. Let's all take a school. And so that's what we did. That's what we did, and began cultivating relationships. And so now, however many years later, my son's enrolled in the school we adopted. We have tremendous relationships with them. I mean, and they have grown from being just one way to the principal dropped off a gift for the baby here a couple weeks ago. Wow. Some of the other teachers had a gift for us. It's become this mutual relationship. That's light, and it wasn't just me. It's been our church going in and volunteering. And
you got a text from was it the principal or one of the teachers that said you don't know what your involvement and connectedness to the school has meant to the school itself.
Yeah. We have just tried to walk alongside of them in some meaningful ways. Now, and part of this is you have to be able to redefine success, right?
Yeah.
So if you go into this thing thinking, well, success is going to be every year we get 5 families to start coming to church and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's not what it's about, right?
Yeah.
It's about
Yes.
going in, right? Being sacramental, right? Being imparting God's grace to the students and to the staff. They don't know what's going on, but I know we're an instrument of God's grace. The time we have sat in very tiny chairs and just sat there helping kids learn their alphabet and not getting frustrated and not telling them they were incapable of doing it and not I mean, that's grace being imparted to them.
And not saying, this is a terrible use of my time. I'm not doing this
Absolutely.
anymore.
And I will be honest, there weren't many days where I was like, yay, I get to go to the school today.
Yeah.
But there was at one time I left going, I really wish I hadn't spent my last
Yeah.
hour that way.
Yeah.
That's just one example
Sure.
of what we've done.
Well, and I think, like, I know you do coaching and
Yeah.
stuff, so I mean, I think, right, those are those, I think, above and beyond, right? And again, with pure motives, right? Like, I'm not volunteering to be the coach because I'm hoping to get 5 of these families to come to church.
Right.
I mean, and if they do, praise the Lord. But I mean, that's not my motivation.
Right.
And the truth is, they can smell that, right? So to
Yeah.
speak, right?
Yep.
They can figure that
man.
out. And
No
it
doubt.
took, there were some walls up initially, and it took some time for
Yep.
the staff of the school to learn. They don't have any ulterior motives. They just want, and the fact that we understand that God's doing something there, they're not threatened by that because we're not in there proselytizing anybody.
Sure.
Right? And so they, but if you go into it with those kinds of motives, people shut down. They're not interested in that.
Some of this is,
Sorry, I cut
you're
you off.
gonna, you're gonna crack up at this analogy, but this is kind of where my mind is right now. Some of this is like barbecue, low and slow.
Yes.
We're playing the long game. We're going to have a low profile. We are there to help. If you're a teacher, I'm here to help you. Mm-hmm. What else are you doing here? Nope, that's it. I'm here to coach your kids in basketball. That's it. Right. Nothing else. Some of the parents that I've coached over the last couple of years, it took them until I had the same kids 2 years in a row, and it took them until the middle of this past season to realize, wait a minute, you're a pastor? Because that was not my goal, that they all knew that I was a local pastor. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to teach them how to play basketball, how to honor one another, all of those ancillary things other than just being a basketball team.
It's not because you were one of those coaches that just yell and scream and cuss at the kids. Right? That's not why they didn't know you were a pastor.
Also not the reason.
Well, this is, I think way back earlier this year in our discussion of the nature of the gospel, we kind of kept coming back to the picture and the idea of exile, right? And those, I think about, the 400 years that they were enslaved by the Egyptians, the 40 years they're wandering the desert, right? The 400 years under Babylonian and Roman, and it's the same thing of going, and again, we live in such an instantaneous society that, and again, I think both of our church's leaderships are not quite this way, but there is, right? There's this results. It's the same thing, we've been doing jiu-jitsu for about a year now. And the same thing, just the other night, had a really good conversation with some of my other gym mates there. And it was really funny as we were kind of having a discussion, like a couple other people kind of drifted into the conversation. And again, I think one guy had, same thing, had no idea that I was a pastor. And again, I'm not there to preach. I'm not there to, I'm there to do jiu-jitsu, right? That's what, and again, an after class, right? If there's people that want to
You
talk.
got questions you want to talk? We can do
sure,
that. But
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and the same thing, and I think tough with us, we homeschool, and so there is an element that is missed there. Or just non-existent maybe.
Yeah.
Of not maybe having some of those inroads with the schools. But
also, isn't this part of taking advantage of every opportunity, what Paul talks about, and say, okay, I don't have this natural opportunity because my kids are in a different form of school. So am I going to bemoan that and just kind of, I guess I can't do anything? No. Yeah. Create some opportunities. Create an opportunity. Right. Create a place where you can engage with people in a very real way that I'm just here to do jiu-jitsu. Yeah. This is good exercise, good connection with my family. Sure. I've got a circle of friends that I never had before.
Yep. How many places did Jesus go for the sole purpose of trying to evangelize somebody versus in his going, in his traveling, situations continuously were arising. Even so, Jesus went, and it's hard to separate out. Well, he's God; he knows everything, and the human nature of it all. But because we could go around Samaria, we could go through Samaria. Let's go through Samaria, and what happens while he's there? Was it a divine appointment, or was it just God seeing somebody well and seizing the opportunity?
But again, right, and the people that wanted to seek him out sought him out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? And you got a guy like Zacchaeus that decides to, kind of debase himself, right? And like a kid, climb a tree and takes advantage, so same, and I always come back to Luke 10. I just love that passage. But the same thing, he sent those disciples out to every town and place that he was about to go.
Right.
With instructions that, some of those places, they're not going to accept you. If they don't accept you, wipe the dust off your feet, head to the next place, prepare the way, and if I come through town, great.
There's something that's very interesting there. It's almost a cry that Jesus is saying, do not demand to be heard.
Yeah.
Do not insist on being recognized. Just go to the places you are already headed.
Yeah.
Show what it looks like to be a follower of mine. And if they don't want it, they don't want it. That's not under your control.
Yep.
That'll preach.
Don't demand to be heard.
Yeah.
And that is not how our culture handles things.
No.
Facebook is to give everybody the demand to be heard. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
That's what, to me, it keeps coming back to that sacramental nature, that sacramental living, right? Living, if the sacraments, they're outward sign of inward grace, right? If they're a symbol of the grace that's going on inside, and they're a way in which God's grace is imparted and bestowed to us, then for us, sacramental living is being an agent of God's grace, being and also too, I think this is true for your tradition, but certainly for the Wesleyan tradition, prevenient grace, right? And knowing that that God's grace is always going before us, it's seeking us out, and oftentimes we are the measure of that prevenient grace. God's using us to draw, to pursue others, to draw them closer to Him.
If we understood that we were the measure of grace, how would that change the way we act, the things that we say?
Well, this goes back to what you were saying, right? Of just trying to keep consistent language from week to week, month to month, and year to year. And, two of the words that I always kind of come back to, right, is it's about witness and it's about being an ambassador, right? It's just one of those things you are the representative that people go, no, don't want to be part of that kingdom. Or going, yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
There might be something there with that kingdom that you're a part of that I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And
that might be worth reflecting on.
Yeah, maybe next month as we head into a
No,
fantastic...
we're already scheduled.
Oh. Political season. The kingdom of Christ.
It's got a cold
Jesus
chill.
for
Sorry.
president.
Yeah, right.
Well, is that good? I think that's good.
Yeah.
With some
Yes,
good follow up there, and so I don't know. Join with us, and just reimagining maybe what your gatherings need to look like, and be praying about how you can maybe re-engage your community, your neighborhood, your school, your church, whatever it may be.
If you're watching this on YouTube, comment, share your ideas. Suggestions.
Yes.
Click like, hit subscribe. All that good stuff. Well, thank you again for tuning in, and God bless you.